The jewellery quarter found near Birmingham city centre has a variety of buildings showing a vast array of functions. A lot of the buildings are of old factories now with a new purpose as the factories are no longer in use. It is clear from looking at the jewellery quarter that Birmingham is proud of its past as an industrial town as much of the character remains. It all began in the 1950s when metalwork began to take off. Over time the produce became more upmarket as did the area. Snuff boxes, mirrors and silver plating became key areas of work. Jewellery produce became so common by the 1970s an office was opened. This then became a benchmark for jewellery production and more offices and factories located here. The main function of this area was to produce jewellery and metals. Demand for produce from the jewellery quarter peaked in the 1920s and a steady decline followed. Predictably, the jewellery quarter was hit hard by the Great Depression in the 1930s and then became a target for bombing in World War II. Since then the area has been redeveloped and now has a variety of functions. The land is used for residential housing, factories, offices, shops, tourism and education. An example of a building that has changed its function is this row of housing. The window frame suggests that the building was once a factory but is now residential housing after the decline of the jewellery industry. This is typical of housing in this area. Today's society culture places great emphasis on old buildings with original features and will often pay a higher price for those buildings. This may be the reason why so many of the buildings in this area have changed function rather than being knocked down when they weren't needed. This photograph is of the Big Peg and was completed in 1961. It was built and designed to be a large factory for smaller business to work within. It also has residential spaces on the top level. The building failed to attract businesses and spent the majority of the time only half occupied. Now the building has changed functions and has become a centre for arts and crafts enterprises with some residential flats. It is because of the decline in injury that this building has had to change its function.
To see if people could guess the function of the Big Peg, we took this picture and showed it to a number of people on the streets of Birmingham. Here's what they had to say.
What do I think it is now?
Yeah.
It looks like it looks like residential apartments, I'm not sure, or could be an office, I don't know. I would suggest it probably isn't an office because it looks like we've got commercial occupancy there. So I would probably think it was residential there but commercial there.
A college, or offices.
That one, I'm not too sure.
Do you have any idea at all? Or?
It's an office block.
Okay.
You can just sort of make a guess from what you told.
Could be tax offices. Okay.
Either office block or flats.
Most people seem to guess correctly and say the Big Peg had some form of residential usage. Others, however, said it was an office block. This shows how deceptive buildings can be when trying to ascertain their function from their exterior.
This photograph is of the first £1 million penthouse in Birmingham. Although being a modern development, it has been built in keeping with the style of the rest of the street and jewellery quarter. This is an example of how the function of the area has changed over time. Previously the function of all the surrounding buildings would have been factories or warehouses, and it is now residential upmarket housing. This photograph is of the old fire station in the jewellery quarter. When the fire station closed down, it was redeveloped into residential housing and a nursery school. The change in function was due to residential housing being in demand in this area and not the fire station. The fire station was built in 1909, so it's likely that at that time it would have been in high demand due to all the local factories. However, now these have mostly closed down, it's become in less demand. The change in function also shows how the area has been conserved, as the history of the fire station has been conserved, as the building still looks reminiscent of a fire station. Overall, when looking at the jewellery quarter, you can see the clear change in function. The area has changed functions from industrial to mainly residential. The buildings, although changed in function, remain the same in appearance as they stood as previous factories.